This is Suraj here. Today we talk about how to manage session in MVC application. So the topic is how to manage session in MVC application. Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's take the first topic. What is session? So a session is used to store user specific data across multiple requests. So a session is used used to store user specific data across multiple requests. Okay, so basically HTTP is stateless. Okay, so let's take HTTP is stateless. So session help us. So session basically help us to maintain login state, store user information, track user activity. Okay, so session in ASP.NET Core MVC, let's talk about. Session in ASP.NET Core. Okay, so in ASP.NET Core, we must enable session first. We must enable session first. Okay, so let's take some steps. Step 1, configure session in pprogram.cs. So we can use the builder.services dot add distributed memory cache, and builder.service add session. Okay, builder.distributed memory cache, builder.add session. After that, we use app is equal to builder.build and app.use session. Okay, so this enable session in middleware. So this is enable in middleware. Let's take step 2. Store data in session. So inside controller, we write some HTTP context. HTTP context dot session dot set string with the key and value. And we can also add HTTP context dot session dot set int 32. We also take the key, user ID and ID. Okay, so this can store it. Now you can use session value. Okay, so let's take example login scenario. In login scenario, after successful login, we just use HTTP context dot session dot set string. Inside have user email, user dot email, the input variable property. In other controller, we just use where email equal to HTTP context dot session dot get string of user email with value. Okay. Email is if email is null, user not logged in. Check if email is null. That's mean user is not logged in. And so we can set the session timeout. Okay. So we can configure timeout. Okay. So inside the program.cs, builder.service.add service. Inside the optional function, inside we pass option dot ideal timeout. Ideal timeout is equal to timeout time span dot from minute 30. So after 30 minutes, the session is cleared. So after 30 minutes of inactivity, session expired. Okay, so let's take some important point. So session store data in memory by default. Okay, or distributed cache. Distributed cache like Radish, SQL Server. Session should not store larger object and sensitive data without encryption. Okay, so let's take 9 point session versus stamp data versus view data. Session versus stamp data versus view data. So the session, let's talk about the session. Session basically data across multiple requests. Okay, and temp data for only redirect. Data for one redirect. And the view data from controller to view, single request. Controller to view. They have single request. Okay, so let's take a definition. In MVC application, session is used to maintain user specific data across multiple HTTP requests. Across multiple requests. It is configured using session middleware. Using session middleware. And across and access through HTTP context dot session. Okay, let's take a final advice. So use session carefully. For modern application, we prefer JWT token and claim-based authentication. Okay, session is useful, but not ideal for large-scale distributed system. Okay, that is the one. So let's take a recap of it. So the topic is how to manage a session in MVC application. So let's take what is the session. A session is used to store user-specific data across multiple requests. The HTTP is stateless. Session help us maintain login state, store user information, take user activity. Let's take part 2. Session in ASP.NET Core MVC. In ASP.NET Core MVC, we must enable session first. Step 1. Configure session in program.cs. Builder.service. Add distributed memory cache. And builder.service.add session. Then we use where app builder.service and app.use session. This is enable session in middleware. Let's take step 2. Store data in sessions. Inside controller HTTP context session.setString. The key and the value. HTTP context session.set integer. The key and value. Pass the key and value. Now you can use session values. Example login scenario. After successful login, we just put HTTP context session.setString. User email, user.email. In other controller, we collect the where email HTTP context.session.getString user email. If email is null, then user is not logged in. Session timeout configuration. You can configure timeout. Builder.service.add session options. Option.ideal timeout. Time span dot 4 minute 30. After 30 minutes of inactivity, session is expired. So let's check important points. Session store data in memory by default or dedicated cache like Redis, SQL Server, etc. Session should not store large object sensitive data without encryption. Session versus temp data versus view data. Session data is across multiple requests. Temp data for one redirect, and view data for controller to view single request. Let's check definitions. In MVC application, session is used to maintain user-specific data across multiple requests. It is configured using session middleware and accessed through HTTP context.session. Final advice: use session carefully. For modern application, prefer JWT token and claim-based authentication. Session is useful but not ideal for larger scale and distributed system. That is about. Thank you.